Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. Today's topic is how to back up and protect your Office 365 data with Veeam. My name is Jim Beddix. I'm the Director of Server and Storage Engineering here at IntegraONE, and co-presenting today from Veeam is going to be Eric Doherty. I'm just going to go over a couple housekeeping items here in the beginning, then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Eric, and I'll be back at the end to tie things off. So just a quick background for anyone who may not be familiar with IntegraONE. We focus on actually selling solutions. We don't like to sell boxes. We're really looking at trying to partner with our customers to ensure that their technology purchases are aligned to making their business outcomes meet the goals of those businesses. So on the screen here, you'll see some of the areas that we specialize in our focus areas. IntegraONE's actually celebrating our 30th year in business this year. We actually have 5 offices spread across the state of Pennsylvania. And across those offices, we have individuals that are specialized in the different verticals that are listed here on the right. So when we do present a solution to you for technology, it's also aligned to your industry to hopefully give you the highest level of success. Hopefully everyone that was qualified did get an email earlier today with a Grubhub gift card, sorry about that. I do apologize if you are subject to E-rate rules, we are not able to send those out to you. But if you are not an E-rate customer, you should have gotten one of those, so make sure you check your inbox and your spam. And if you didn't get one, let us know, but hopefully you did and you're enjoying some delicious food right now. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Eric, and he will handle the bulk of the presentation. Eric, it's up to you.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We're going to go over, as Jim said, backing up Office 365, and we're going to talk a little bit about why you should be doing that, what's actually covered by default, and what you can be doing to make sure that you have the protection that you need for that valuable data that's stored in your O365 tenant. So a little bit about Veeam for those of you that aren't familiar. Our solutions started about 13 years ago with backup of virtual machines from disk to disk. We have since evolved to do backups from disk to disk, disk to tape, cloud to cloud, virtual to cloud, physical to cloud. Pick a platform, we can just about do any sort of backup and recovery that you need with it. So why work with us? Because of that flexibility. We don't lock into specific vendors, so you can use the best vendor that makes sense from a hardware perspective for your environment. You can use your backup data for different things other than just sitting there waiting for a disaster. You can use that for more testing to monetize that backup data possibly as well. There are a lot of different flexible things that you can do with that as well. A lot of good alerting, reporting, regulatory things that are built into our products so that you can easily meet the regulatory requirements that you have as a company. So simply put, Veeam is simple, flexible, and reliable. We're simple in that you could download a demo of our software and have it running within, an hour or less on a couple machines just to test and see if you like it. But we're flexible enough to go from the smallest customer with 10 users or 10 servers the whole way up into 10,000 servers or 10,000 mailboxes or 10 mailboxes. It doesn't matter the size. We are flexible, especially because we are software defined and we don't have to be tied to specific hardware. So we grow as you grow. And our reliability is industry known. The catchphrase we used to use, "It just works," actually came from our customers, not from a marketing team. Because the more we interviewed our customers, said, "Why do you like Veeam so much?" It just works, and it kind of stuck. So a little bit about our platform overall. Our flagship product is in the middle of the screen, Veeam Backup and Replication. That's the platform that does virtual machines, physical machines, cloud workloads, can back up to the cloud, can back up from the cloud. We can do VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix AHV, physical servers. We can do Windows, Linux, Oracle, AIX, Office 365 platform for software as a service. We work with the major clouds out there, Azure, AWS, IBM Cloud, plus there are others out there as well. Those are just the main ones that we list. As far as the hardware we work with, through our Universal Storage API, we can talk with just about every vendor out there. So there's minimal limitation on what we can do to talk directly to storage to do backup and recovery from the storage platform and even from the storage snapshots. So let's get into it. Why backup Office 365? Great question. Well, to start with, 76% of businesses that are using Office 365 are left unprotected. The way I look at it, and from my experiences, there's three main categories of Office 365 customers when it comes to backup. There's the ones that are doing it using some sort of product. Maybe it's not Veeam, maybe it is, but they're doing it. That's probably the smallest group right now. Then there's the group that knows they should be doing something but hasn't figured out what to do yet. And at least they are aware there's a problem. The larger and more dangerous group is probably the one that thinks Microsoft's doing it for us. We don't need to back it up because it's in the cloud. The problem with that is they don't know what they don't know. And they are thinking that they are protected and they're not. And that is a large group of customers out there. And part of our goal is to make sure that we educate customers on what they actually are getting from Office 365 by default, and make sure that they know what they need to do to get where they need to be from a backup perspective. So to look at what analyst firms have to say about backing up Office 365, to put it simply, adopting Office 365 without enterprise-grade backup is a risky strategy. You look at IDC, they have their own opinions, they say the same things. We look at some other ones, we have Forrester saying back up your SaaS data because most SaaS providers don't. And I'll talk more about what they do and don't do in just a little bit. There's an assumption that the data isn't SaaS, it's automatically backed up, and that's not the case. The key phrase here, just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that you don't have to back it up. The policy that I usually like to refer to when I talk to customers is, if it was important enough for you to back it up when it was on-prem, it should still be important enough for you to back it up when it's in the cloud. So think about that. If you were backing up your Exchange and your SharePoint when you were hosting them on-prem, you should probably have some sort of a plan for doing that when it's in the cloud as well. So why do I need a backup? Let's talk about that group that thinks Microsoft's taking care of it. So that perception is, I put it out there, I'm paying Microsoft a monthly fee. If I need to get emails back, if something happens and a mailbox gets corrupted, I can call them and I can get that mailbox restored. That's not really the case though. What's really happening is they're maintaining the infrastructure, the network, the security of it, the physical hardware to make sure that Office 365 stays online. They're backing up and replicating the data in as much as they need to meet their SLAs for that platform staying online. When it comes down to it, the data is the customer's responsibility. You're going to hear me say that many more times over the next several minutes. So how is that delineation of responsibility broken out? Office 365 has a shared responsibility model. And as we look through this list here, you see the Microsoft's responsibility and you see yours as the customer's responsibility. If you look at it, almost everything has to do with data in the your responsibility section. If you look at Microsoft's responsibility, it's the uptime, the SLAs. It's the data replication to make sure that they can keep it up, the SLA. Security at the infrastructure level. Again, they need to make sure they keep it secure and online. And the regulatory requirements that are needed so that they can keep the data online and protected to their needs for their SLAs. The actual data inside the platform, they don't touch it. They don't want to touch it because there are problems. Obviously, if they start backing up your data, that means they're reading your data, and they've kind of broken an invisible wall there of getting into your data when they actually should stay out of it and only be a platform provider. So when it comes down to it, if you look at what's needed, you need to be responsible for the data itself, for backing it up, for the retention. How long do you want to keep that data in perpetuity? 3 years, something different depending on the type of data. Protect against certain things at the data level, like your problems with accidental deletion or ransomware, internal threats, external threats. So at Veeam, we have a white paper, which if you use the little QR code at the top, you could download, called 6 Reasons Why You Need an Office 365 Backup. And it is the 6 reasons that you see on the screen here. And if you look through them, as accidental deletion, internal threats, external threats, a lot of those have to do with people. Be they good people doing bad things, bad people doing bad things. unintentional problems, malicious actors, things happen, and most things have to do, unfortunately, with people doing things they shouldn't be doing. And there's also reasons why when it comes to for retention, for policies, for compliance, for regulatory. So you combine together the actions of people and the requirements of regulations, and you come up with pretty much your entire 6 reasons here. So you have these 6, it's like, yeah, that's great, but how much do they really happen? Quite a bit. So we did a survey last year of about 1,600 customers, and within the cloud, what kind of data loss have you experienced? Accidental deletion of data. I can honestly say that even for myself, I have accidentally done this in my lab, moving too fast, and accidentally deleted the wrong VMs. It's a lab, who cares? It cost me some time, but it didn't cost the company any downtime or money playing in my own lab. Pay attention, stop watching a hockey game while you're working is the lesson there. But you can see how easily you could delete important data if you're not paying attention. That's accidental, good actor doing something bad. Then you have your bad actor. So security threats, things happen either inside or outside of your building. You add all these together, the retention policy gaps, thinking you were protected, but you're not. Talked to quite a few security people who did not revisit the policies of retention and recoverability for their platforms when they moved from on-prem, say Exchange or SharePoint. When they moved that out to Office 365, they assumed that the same policies were in place when they moved that platform off-prem that they had when it was on-prem. And that's not a good assumption. So I've talked to them and said, no, that's not the case. And they've gone back to their teams to figure out what holes they need to fill in. So what does Microsoft actually do for you? Because you can get some stuff back. So what we're looking at here is the default settings for an E3 license for Microsoft Office 365. So what can we get back from that? We can keep your, as long as you keep your data in your inbox, it's there until 2 years later, it's moved to an archive inbox. Your deleted items, by default, they're in there for a week in there, and you can remove them. You can recover them. I apologize. You can recover them from that mailbox for up to 30 days before they're permanently deleted out of that recycle bin. The auto archive data gets moved to archive by a month, as long as it, by default, it's set by that. SharePoint, same deal. You can delete it. You have a month to get it. Second stage, that admin could do a recoverability for up till 90 days. Same goes for OneDrive. The big one that I look at for this is when the employee leaves the company. When an employee leaves a company, their manager that's set in the Office 365 Active Directory gets an email that says you have 30 days until all the data for this employee is deleted for you to decide what to do with it. So what can happen is a couple of things, and that I've seen happen. Number one, what usually happens is right away, whatever's important for the current projects going on is redistributed out to whoever's taking over those projects when the employee leaves. So that stuff gets moved around as needed. But the problem is that older stuff. So you get close to that 30 days and a couple things can happen. One, somebody could forget all about that data. And now all of a sudden after 30 days, everything disappears. And you may not realize it until 6 months down the road, somebody comes and says, hey, Bob was working on project XYZ last year. I need all the files for that. We're kicking that up again. And they're gone because they were never backed up and the manager forgot to act on them. It happens. It's nothing malicious. It's just the way that the policies work within the platform. The other thing that could happen is that the manager knows they have to do something and they're not sure what. So they end up just taking everything and dumping it into their OneDrive, let's say. They take all the OneDrive data, dump it into their OneDrive. Now that's great because at least a copy exists, but nobody else in the company knows that copy exists. It's not searchable. If another employee calls the help desk and asks to have all the files based on that project recovered, they're not even going to see those. And if that manager leaves, we have the same problem perpetuating itself. But if these are backed up on a regular basis, when that employee leaves, you're not going to have this problem because then you could always call the help desk and say, I need all the files that Bob was working on for project XYZ from last year. They'll be able to do a thorough search and send all those files back to you. So if you're covering, if you had everything covered with Veeam, from the day you start doing it, you're protected, and you can set your retention policies as you need. So it could be 5 years, 7 years, perpetual, a year, and it could be different based on every type of data in there. So OneDrive might be different than SharePoint, might be different than Exchange, or you could have it so that different levels of employees have different retentions. Whatever your company's policy is, it's flexible enough to make those policy settings. And just to reiterate, because I always like it when they come straight from the horse's mouth about the data in Office 365, if you go out to Microsoft's Office 365 Trust Center, one of the first things that you see is this little screen that says with Office 365, it's your data, you own it, you control it. I've been at Microsoft events where Julia White, who's pictured here, is on stage, and she says something along those lines, and people cheer and they're happy because that means that you're not spying on me, you're not indexing my data to use against me for advertising or other things. You're staying out of my data, yay, and everybody cheers and everybody's happy because they're the good company that's not messing with your data. But I always think that it should be a little more ominous. Maybe the lighting should come down and she should be a little more serious and say, it's your data, you own it, you control it. So you better be doing something with it. And I think that's really the message. While they're taking it as a positive that they're not touching it for security and privacy reasons, great. The reminder needs to be that nobody's doing it if you're not doing it yourself. And for those that think that they can call Microsoft and get back certain objects in their email as needed, which is something that happens often where somebody deletes an email from 6 months ago and needs it recovered or something like that, it's clearly called out that you cannot do a point-in-time restoration by calling Microsoft. That is out of the scope of the Exchange service. If you need that, you need a third party to do it. Veeam Backup for Office 365. So if we look at the native capabilities that we have for Veeam Backup for Office 365 versus what Office 365 itself can do, let's just, again, I told you I was going to say this about 100 times over the next few minutes. Microsoft isn't the data owner, you are, so you need to do something with it. Archiving, which a lot of people say, oh, archiving and litigation hold, I'll use those and that'll be my backup. That way I'll always have that data available. It can't be deleted. That is true, but archiving is not backup. It is still one copy of the data. So all that means is that one copy is being moved from a main mailbox to an archive mailbox. You still don't have a second copy that's a moment in time of that mailbox or of that SharePoint site. So you can't go back in time with that. Those tools have a purpose. Backup isn't that. The replicated copy is updated from a single source. Think about that. It's garbage in, garbage out. If the main copy of your mailbox that's being run on Office 365 gets corrupted, that corruption is going to get replicated to wherever else they're replicating it for their uptime. Again, the data is your responsibility. They'll do their best to get that data back online, but there's not a lot of guarantees. That's where a backup would come in. So you say, okay, I can get everything back as of last night. I'm only going to lose a few hours. Maybe I can have people resend me what they sent me today and be covered. So using Veeam Backup for Office 365, it puts the organization back in control of that data. You could put that data, you could store that in Azure. You could store that in AWS. You can make a copy back down to your own data center if you want to. And I have talked to customers who have actually not moved to Office 365 because one of their requirements was to be able to maintain a copy of that data on-prem. Now they can do that with Office Backup for Office 365, whereas before there was no tool for getting all that data easily back into their own prem. And then there's also the side of it that says, I worked so hard to get this data offsite, why would I want to bring it back? I want to keep it in the cloud. Fun fact for you, as far as the speed of backup, there's no speed or benefit to backing up to Azure for Office 365 over AWS. You're still going out over the internet. You're still, have that ingress egress. There's no back channel to connect Azure to Office 365 that's going to make it faster. So if you prefer to use AWS for the backups, that's great. Prefer to use Azure, that's great. Whatever works for you. Again, we're flexible. And speaking of flexibility, there's over 25 ways that you can recover your data in Veeam Backup for Office 365. So if you can think of it, we can probably do it for you. We can restore to original locations, we can restore to alternate locations, download copies of files or emails, and email them off, put them in a zip, drop them in a new location on a server somewhere, whatever you need. Again, the flexibility is yours. So to talk a little bit about the history of the product before we talk forward about what's new in version 4, I want to give you a little background on where we've come from. So the first version of this product came out not even 4 years ago. And with that, we could back up Exchange Online. Quickly after, we added some features with version 1.5 less than a year later. Then we really hit our stride in July 2018, where we now were able to back up all the components of Office 365. So OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, we could back up all those. Now with version 3 at the beginning of 2019, we sped up those backups. We increased the security on them. We enhanced our reporting. All of our reporting enhancements always come from feedback from our customers. So if you're ever using our reporting and don't see something that you want, be sure to offer feedback, because it's the best way to get it into the next update of our product. So at this point, we can back up everything in Office 365. We can quickly back it up now, back it up even faster. We added the additional security by adding multi-factor authentication. Now, the end of 2019, we came out with version 4. We had all that. What could we add that would make it even better? Well, one of the first things that we added is object storage support. So for those folks that wanted to do their backups to Azure AWS, they were using more expensive block storage before, so like drive letters on virtual machines in those platforms. And with the amount of data that you can get in Office 365, that can get expensive kind of quickly. So it was a little bit of a turnoff to use the cloud, even though it made the most sense to use the cloud. But now that we can use object storage, so that would be AWS S3 or Azure Blob, we can now more affordably do those backups and keep them all in the cloud. We can also use object storage on-prem if you choose to pull it back to on-prem. So cloud-based appliances, other third-party object storage, doesn't have to be Azure, AWS, could be any object storage of your choosing. We have the ability to do that. The beauty of using that is it can scale infinitely, and it is much more affordable than traditional storage. We enhanced the backup performance again, because you may or may not have run into, and maybe if you did, it's usually during a migration, most folks run into it, is some backup and data movement slowness. Microsoft will throttle Office 365 data if they see a lot of traffic coming from one account to one Office 365 org. They'll start to throttle that connection to the point that things just crawl. So what we've done to speed up the backup of SharePoint and OneDrive for Business is we made the ability to use multiple backup accounts. So instead of having one backup account pulling in a single stream of data, we can use multiple and pick small amounts of data with each account and kind of keep the throttling people at bay, so that we can keep that up. In some basic tests, we're doing some lab tests recently for a small thing we were doing. Even for a small 10-user organization with a few hundred gigs of data, we've seen just by adding 3 backup accounts, we've gone from like 25-minute backups down to like 7 or 8-minute backups. So it makes a difference no matter what size environment you are. Microsoft's going to throttle it, and you have to have a way to work around it, and this way is working very well for us. Some additional features that are part of the product that you may not think of but are absolutely beneficial are, many people have a hybrid environment today. They still have some Exchange or SharePoint on-prem, but they have the bulk of it, let's say, in Office 365. Excuse me. You don't want to use multiple tools for those backups. We have the ability that we can do a hybrid environment, so we can back up that on-prem and the online components of your Exchange or SharePoint using one tool. So it's one tool to back up and one tool to restore, no matter where those mailboxes are. The beauty of being able to do that as well is we could be used as a migration tool. So if you're in the process of moving from on-prem out to Office 365, we could be used so that you could back up from on-prem and recover it to a mailbox, recover that data to a mailbox out in Office 365. And should you want to move them back, you could do the same thing as well. As far as the interfaces go, if you're familiar with Veeam products, these interfaces are going to look familiar to you. Looks very much, while it's not the Veeam backup and replication console, it looks quite a bit like it, so it's not going to take long for you to become familiar with that interface and be able to run your backup jobs. As far as recovery goes, it's the same tools that you've used in the past when doing restores if you used Veeam backup and replication, the Exchange Explorer, the SharePoint Explorer, and the OneDrive Explorer, which is based on the SharePoint Explorer and is very familiar looking. You have your users and the different folders listed on the left-hand side and the data contained within on the right-hand side. So to summarize, if I've driven anything home today, I hope it's that Office 365 data is not backed up by default, and that backup is your responsibility as the customer. Veeam Backup for Office 365 backs up all Office data. We can work with hybrid scenarios, and that data could be stored on-prem or in the cloud in object storage. And as far as the restore goes, we can restore that data in a multitude of ways.
All right, thanks, Eric. That was a great presentation. Just one other thing I'd like to mention, Eric called out very early on how Veeam is very flexible. The backup for Office 365, he did mention, you can have the infrastructure that pulls those backups down on-prem for you, or you can choose to have that infrastructure completely hosted in the cloud and stored there. We actually do partner with a cloud service provider company that also does this using the Veeam Office 365 product, but they do it as a service for you. So in that case, it's very, very easy to consume. You basically just need to know the number of users that you have, and it's priced strictly on the user count. They don't have any limits on how much data you store, how long you keep it. So it's just another way that we can actually bring the Veeam backup for Office 365 solution into the environment for you. So if you're interested in that or any of the things that you heard today, definitely follow up with us. We are going to open it up to questions right now. So if you do have any questions, you do have the ability to either use the chat or the question feature in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll watch for those and do our best to answer them. And while we're waiting for some of those to come in, we'll kind of tie it off here. If you like the event that you saw today, our webinar here on Veeam Backup for Office 365, keep an eye on our website. The URL down there below, IntegraONE.com/events. We run a number of events, webinars, roundtables, virtual labs, you name it. It'll all be posted up there. So keep an eye on that and sign up for some more. So there will be a survey coming out to you following the event here today. Please do fill that out and send it back to us. It does give us some great feedback on how we did, as well as what kind of future events you might like to see. So with that, I'll take an eye here and see if we have any questions pop in. And we've got a minute or two left here.
I'm going to preempt a question that usually comes up in case somebody's typing it already, and that's around Teams data. Today, we have the ability to back up the data in Teams, not the team itself. There is a way that we can do that. We have a white paper on how to configure all of that. In the next version, it will be a native, simple to use feature to just back up Teams completely. Right now, we have the ability to do the O365 groups, the data that's stored in the files, the chat information, all that can be taken and just needs to be restored into a new team. But moving forward, we're going to have the ability to do full Teams backup, and that version is very near on the horizon from what I hear, but I don't have any official information.
Great, thanks for that, Eric. I don't see any other questions coming in, and we are right at our 2:30 stop time. So I think we're going to go ahead and end it here. The session was recorded, so you can see it on our website and play it back if you'd ever want to do that, or reach out to us for more information. So Eric, thanks again for all your time today. I think that was great information, and we'll see you at a future event.